All right, so this is going to be part 2 in the video on hamstring pulls. The other video, the first one I did, was about the strength component to hamstring pulls and just being strong through the posterior chain, the hamstrings, and the exercises that I like to use to almost bulletproof hamstrings from pulls. So this part is going to be more on the flexibility side of it. Where most people make mistakes is they throw either one or the other out. They do a ton of strength training, but very little flexibility training. And you don't need to do a lot of flexibility training if you already have the required flexibility. If you don't, you need to get yourself there before you can back off of that a little bit. Now, if you do have the required flexibility, if you have enough flexibility, you could get away with just strength training and training through a full range of motion in that tissue, and you'll maintain your flexibility. If you don't, you need to kind of get that flexibility, and then you need to continually train it as well. So you're gaining strength in the length that you're acquiring, right? So if you don't strength train it and you just stretch it, it's just as bad as being tight. You have just as big of risk. You're just as big of a risk for injury or a hamstring pull as you are if you are tight, right? So if I get super flexible hamstrings but don't have strength through the full range of motion, the full length of my, if I don't have strength through length, basically, I'm at a huge risk for injury as well, right? So if you could bend down and put your palms to the floor, but you don't have strength through that length, you're at just as great a risk as injury as if you could basically touch your hands to your shins, right? So you need to make sure you're developing, you're gaining length and you're gaining strength through that full length as well, right? Okay, so just wanted to start with that. Now, for us, I try to keep the flexibility pretty simple. Now, it's best to, most athletes don't stretch enough. Okay, what they do is they do maybe 10 seconds, they bend down, they touch their toes for 10 seconds, or they don't even reach their toes, they touch their knees for 10 seconds, they grab their ankle for 10 seconds, and that's it. That's their flexibility. If you're already flexible and you do that, that's your warm-up, great, that'll be fine. But if you're not flexible enough, you need to dedicate a certain amount of time to becoming more flexible. For us, in our warm-ups, we do about a minute. We hold stretches for about a minute and try to relax into them. The best thing to do is to find ways to stretch and be able to relax. Because most of the athletes that I work with, that we work with, are strength and power athletes. So it's any sport that requires strength, power, explosiveness. Those athletes tend to be a little bit tighter, and to be able to relax into stretches to acquire more range of motion is going to be huge, right? So you don't need to hold them for 10 minutes at a time, but a minute, 2 minutes, maybe up to 3 minutes, and get yourself set up so that you could relax. And that's why we stretch basically the way we stretch, is because it allows us to relax into stretches and hold them for an extended period of time and really improve on the flexibility. So 10 seconds isn't enough. Now, also another thing with flexibility is the more frequently you could hit it, it's going to be better. So it's better to do 10 minutes of stretching every day as opposed to, or twice a day, as opposed to just trying to cram it all into an hour once a week. So if you have the option of going to yoga for once a week for an hour, or doing 20 minutes a day of stretching every day of the week, or 5 days a week, or something like that, you're better off breaking that up into 20-minute sessions multiple times a week rather than cramming it all into one session. Now, after I got that out of the way we break down our stretching for hamstrings is going to come, it's basically threefold. So it's going to be, the first pattern is going to be basically a bend pattern. So can the athlete put his palms on the floor cold? So can he walk into the gym, or she, can they walk into the gym, bend over, put their palms to the ground cold? So basically we're going down, knees locked, trying to get our palms to the ground. So I'm, at my knuckles maybe, I'm not quite palms to the ground, so I'm still working on that. But that's basically, you'd be surprised how many athletes, they're going maybe to their ankle, mid-shin, they can't even get anywhere near the ground with their palms. Okay, so that's what we're shooting for, palms to the ground. The other one would be a side split, which I cannot do right now. And the third one would be a front split. Okay, so side split would be legs out to the side in a split, and front split would be, you know, 1 foot, 1 leg to the front, 1 leg to the back in a split, torso vertical. Those would be the three, basically the 3 ways that we're attacking the hamstrings. Now, are all of our athletes going to get to those standards? The palms to the floor, probably the most important one to start with. So that I'd like to see all of our guys get to. The other 2, we might work towards them, continuously working towards them to improve flexibility, but we might not really get to do a full split. You know, the more muscular you are, the harder it is to improve flexibility, so that's another thing you have to take in consideration. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be flexible. Okay, so now with the palms to the floor, the first way we do this is, let me see if I can set this up so you can see over here. The first way we do this is, if they can't get to the floor, we're going to stack something up so they can relax into the stretch and get to it. So I have mats here, and I'm just putting my hands on the mats. And as I get more flexible, and I hold this for a minute or 2, I can take one off. Then I go to 3 mats or whatever, and I take one off. And I just keep going down like that until I'm getting my palms to the floor. Obviously, this process would cover the course of weeks, right? So it's not just going to happen right at once. Now, the other one for that bend pattern that we do is more, it's kind of a strength. It's not really strength, it's more, we're working more stretching here, but there is a strength component to it because it's almost like a weighted stretch, and that's what's called a Jefferson curl. So you stand on a box, I set that box up right there, and you basically round yourself over just like you did when you're trying to touch your palms to the floor, but we use weight in our hands, and we try to get past our toes with our hands. Now, we might have our athletes start just standing on the floor with this, and then start to elevate them as they get more flexible. And the weight isn't that important on this. It's just enough weight to be able to pull them into a stretch and let them relax and then come back up. Okay, so if you use too much weight, you'll get tense. You won't be able to stretch. If you don't use enough, you know, if you're a bigger, stronger guy and don't use enough weight, you won't get a good enough stretch on this. So I'm just going to use an empty barbell, but typically I'll use maybe 100, 115 pounds on this. So we're just going to tuck our chin, round our shoulders, 1 vertebrae at a time, and let ourselves just relax down into this stretch. And then we do reps, a couple reps, and then we hold it. You can hold it up to 30 seconds here. And that will help to improve. That'll be like, that's the full hamstring, the back. We're stretching the back on that, middle back, lower back, upper back, hamstrings, upper hamstring, middle, and lower behind the knee. Some guys are tighter up in their insertion where the hamstring inserts onto the hip, and some guys are tighter where it crosses the knee, the lower hamstring. That'll get all of them. Now, so that's the next thing. And then in terms of splits, if they can't do the front split, the one that I like to use is this. A couple of them here. You put your foot on the slant board, and then the back knee you can bend or straighten, and then the front leg is obviously locked out. And we're going to go down and hit that one leg at a time. Hold that stretch. That's very simple. Now, if you notice, a lot of these stretches are super simple, easy to do. You don't necessarily need a lot of equipment. You could do these at home. Maybe not if you don't have a barbell, but you could hold something else. And then the other front split one. Sorry, I just have to set this up. These benches to basically prop ourselves up into that split position. So one leg out, one leg back. We're trying to straighten the back leg as much as we can. We keep a slight bend in the front knee. Torso is vertical, and you can kind of hold yourself on the bench and sink into this. Now I'm going to go, what I like to do is I typically pulse up and down on this stretch, so it's a little bit dynamic, maybe 20 times. Then I hold it, I squeeze, so it's a contract, relax, contract it, and then relax and try to go even deeper into that stretch. And that works the front, those two work the front splits. Now, the side split is a little bit more adductors, groin, the inner part of their hamstrings. So the two ways we do it, either standing or seated. So standing, we would just get wide and then fold from the waist. We're almost trying to push ourselves down, our chest stay up a little bit on this. And basically what we're trying to do is get our head to the ground. Okay? That would be a standing split, and then the other one would be seated on the ground. And we give our athletes the options here with these. So when we do our stretching, we tell them, you could pick, when we work on those, you could pick standing, seated, you could do them with your foot on the board, or you could do them against this bench here to hold, so you can hold yourself up, or we give athletes options to pick what they like to do, what they feel best doing. If they don't need hamstring stretching that much, then and they're good just strength work, they already have the range, then they don't have to do it at all. Okay. But the next one would just be a seated, and I like to use something so they could get themselves into. They can use I straddle this bench here so that I could get leverage and pull myself more into this stretch. Okay, and then at each stretch we have certain standards, just like strength training, that we're trying to hit. So the first one might be able to just get vertical, and then the next one might be trying to get our head to the ground, and then we're trying to get our chest to the ground. Okay, so that's how we attack hamstrings from the flexibility standpoint. We already did the strength standpoint, but again, the key here is, like I said before, it's acquiring length, but also acquiring strength in that length. So full range of motion, but strength through that full range of motion. When you deviate from one of those, you tend to run into some problems. I've gone from being tight to flexible to tight to flexible again, and it is much better. I feel better, perform better. Most athletes just perform better because they're just feeling more limber, and they can move better if they are a little bit looser as opposed to being tight. Because in the strength and conditioning industry, it is always an argument if athletes should be stretching. I've kind of gone both ways on the subject, and I definitely think that stretching more, they're gonna be better off being more flexible and stretching as opposed to staying away from it. So, and that's it for the hamstring flexibility portion of the video.